Well, we all know life isn't a bowl full of cherries, and sometimes when it throws you a curveball, I like to have a sit-down chat with my friend Jaime Mann, who helps me navigate through all of life's messes. I have to tell this story. I had such a giggle. Anyways, a friend of mine, we're in the class, hot yoga class, right? Okay. And we had the mats and everything like that. And talk about spatial awareness. Anyways, she was beside this guy. And he had just no clue of people around him.
Yeah.
And like, it was to a point where his feet were on her mat. And it was just like, she just turned around and looked at me and was going like, what the? And, you know, and here you're supposed to be total namaste and quiet. Right. And I almost lost it. I was laughing so hard, but he is just flailing along there. And she was just beside herself. But I mean, we said after, I said, what was that? She said, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
I can't make sense of it.
Yeah. So I said, like, does he have like no kind of self-awareness?
Yeah.
Because he obviously didn't know or care about the people around them.
Yeah.
And then we got in this conversation. Yeah, like this goes like way beyond just being in a spatial thing.
Right. 100%. Yeah. There's I mean, that makes me think of just even every time I go to the grocery store, like the same thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you really do need to be like practicing mindfulness and like deep breathing and stuff when you do these things, or air travel. Same thing,
no. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yes.
But no, like people genuinely aren't very aware. Like if we're talking about just self-awareness, how we are with other people.
Yeah.
I think the research, it's really interesting because in studies, people, basically like 90% of people say, I'm self-aware.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we all think we're self-aware, but the research shows that only about 15% of us actually are. So there's a big gap. And so self-awareness is one of those things I like to think about for myself, but also work with people, because it's one of those things that most times we're just not. We're not. We have our own lens.
Yeah, like,
and it's called like the spotlight. The spotlight is on us, right? Yeah. I'm the lead of my story. And so we sometimes don't know what is happening around us. But self-reflection is key. So thinking about how am I with people? Or like, what message am I sending people when I say words, but everything else sends a different message, you know?
So does that have something to do with the rested bitch face?
Well, there is that thing. And it can be something so simple as like the habits we have, whether it's the habits we have with how we hold our body or like the face, right? Yes. Or it can be something as simple as some people have a habit of as soon as they start talking to people, they might like do this.
Yes, and that's closing them off.
Right. And so I might be doing that with no intention of being standoffish,
right?
But you might feel that. And so body language, that's really interesting. The other thing though too with self-awareness I find is that when we're thinking about how to better connect with people or how to better lead people is what are the stories I tell myself, say about that guy who's on my yoga mat, or about the person the other day on the plane who coughed right into my face. There's two way or multiple ways I could go about that. I could say, wow, this person is such a flippin' jerk. I'm going to really, I'm going to show this guy. And then my behaviors are going to take me on something that isn't productive.
Yeah.
Or I could say, wow, the yoga guy, this guy is so zen and he is so yoga that he doesn't even know what's happening. Good for him. Like he's in it. Yeah. So there's, what do I tell myself?
Exactly.
And if I'm thinking about in business, what do I tell myself and how does that impact my goals or where I want to go.
Yeah.
Because when I work with people, it's things like, okay, my habit stories. Like, oh, I'm not going to run that meeting. Everyone's going to think I'm an idiot, or I don't know anything. I can't do that. What are those habit things we tell ourselves?
Yeah.
Because guaranteed, if there's a habit story we tell ourselves that isn't aligned with what we truly want and what our goals are, it's going to be so much harder to kind of get over that.
Well, exactly.
It takes too much energy.
Totally. And so then on the flip side of that, if you're not aware, but then also that wonderful word bias.
Oh, yeah.
And I think biases, and correct me if I'm wrong, but those are almost like happen like at a very young age, and it's like the environment, correct, that you grow up in, like it's your parents or the caregivers that you have, right?
So when we're talking about things like stereotypes and things like that, what did we grow up with?
Yeah.
That's kind of like, I think of it like computer programming that's been installed. Like we didn't say, yes, install, but it was installed.
Yeah.
So when we get to a certain age or a certain maturity level, I'll say maturity level because there's people who are age is high and there's been no change in any sort of emotional development, right?
I can think of a few people.
So like the number of candles on your birthday cake doesn't mean you're somehow enlightened or anything like that. So that takes work to be aware of like what are the biases I'm working with. And the other thing is that if we're talking about biases, there's a lot of biases that are just human. So it's not really about what I grew up with or what sort of things my parents said about certain types of people. There's just certain cognitive biases that our brains do. Ooh. So, you know, gender bias is a whole other thing. Stereotypes is a whole other thing, and those are super important to be aware of. But thinking about, when we make decisions, one of the things that is so interesting and scary, actually, if you're not aware of this, is that we're more likely to put more weight or importance on information that comes at us that actually proves a belief we already have.
Ooh.
So we'll dismiss information that disproves that belief, and we'll grab onto information that proves the belief.
Wow.
And that happens without us knowing it. So, that's the thing, like if you're watching the news, if you've ever, political stuff is charged, man, right? And so if you've ever had conversations with people who, they believe one thing about a political party or whatever else, I know I've been in situations where I go, how on earth is this your belief when literally that news story also said this? But it's almost like that didn't even land. Like they didn't even notice it.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy without that critical eye to just rely on that information that proves our own existing belief.
Wow. So that is like, but my brain goes to like all the advertisements that you get up on your phone as soon as online, like if you do online shopping, or they know
That's a really good analogy, actually. Like what was I looking for recently, and now all of a sudden all my ads are for that thing.
Yes.
And that's kind of like what our brain does. It's like all of a sudden all those things are visible, and some of the other stuff isn't.
I know.
So that's exactly it. And one of the other biases too that comes up quite a bit when we're trying to connect with people is there's something called attribution bias. And so when somebody else does something, I'm more likely to attribute it or make it mean something internal about you, your character. So let's just say that you're late for a meeting.
Yeah.
I would be more likely to automatically go, oh, yeah, Tracy was late for the meeting because she just always is about herself. Like she just doesn't care about anybody. But if I was late for the meeting, I'm more likely to actually attribute that behavior to something outside of me. So like 2 trains this morning. Oh, I couldn't help it.
Line up Starbucks and come up.
But it's like that idea, like I just automatically I get myself off the hook.
Yeah.
And then I hold you to certain standards it's a character-based thing.
Yeah.
I'm less likely to go, oh, Tracy, probably the kids were difficult this morning.
Yeah.
I'm more likely to automatically go, well, guess she's not committed to the company or something like that. So it's just really interesting when we think about the stories we have running and our thoughts and what we're relying on to make decisions and how we're going to approach people.
Okay, so now this is really cool because when we talk about friendship then, friends who we think we can, number one, trust, rely on, share things.
Right.
Do we have preconceived or whatever stories about them?
Well, that's a good question. I would say the answer to that would depend on the type of friendship. High quality friendships are beautiful and special, and those are the friendships where you 100% feel supported, not judged, even if you have the most horrible thing, this weird thing you want to bring up, you're okay, you're safe, right?
Yeah.
But there are also friendships that aren't safe like that. And those are the ones, like if you think of like the frenemies, or like the toxic friendships where you leave feeling depleted or worse about yourself or frustrated. Yeah. Those are the ones that this kind of stuff.
But you tend to gravitate more to those people too.
I hope not. I hope not, Tracy.
I know, but well, and it's interesting too. Like we were just talking about it. Our group of friends, I mean, even though like I am a visible minority as being Japanese Canadian, but most of our friends are Caucasian, like white.
Right. Well, and that's with bias. If I think about bias, that's also something interesting to consider as far as, does everybody I work with look like me, think like me? Do all my friends look like me, think like me? And one of the things in building, first of all, like empathetic leadership or building just our own personal development, it's really, really valuable to notice and go, how come I do always sit with the people who look like me in the lunchroom? Because that's another bias, right?
Yeah.
Affinity bias. Inside, we feel more connected to, we're drawn to people that look like us.
Yeah.
So also that's normal. But it's what do we do with that?
I know. And that can be scary too.
Well, it can be because it doesn't feel as comfortable. And I would say the fact that it doesn't feel as comfortable, whether it's I'm going to run this meeting and I've never done this before, or whether I'm going to sit with this group of people who I don't know as well. Just because it feels uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not a good thing to do. Right. It might actually be a really good thing to do.
Yeah.
And so like sometimes that's the new mantra some people decide to go with. Like if it feels uncomfortable, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. And is that a good thing? Well, I guess
obviously with a critical eye, you want to assess that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go outside in a bikini right now, right? That would feel uncomfortable. But like, think about it with a critical eye.
Well, like, okay, so trying to get out of the box, like think out of the box. What does that mean? Like,
well, I would say that thinking out of the box is going to mean things like really relying a lot more on self-reflection and looking at, first of all, what I'm doing, what's the result of that? First of all, is that working, or is the thing that I've always done not working anymore? Because sometimes it's like learning new things, but also unlearning.
Yeah, and that's true. Like unlearning or breaking old habits or whatever like that too. It's just, I just giggle now because it goes back to the guy on the yoga mat. And okay, you say maybe he's really totally into it and good for him.
Could be.
But still, guy, get off my mat.
Get your dirty toes off my mat.
Like,
I know, for sure. For sure. For
so
sure.
there are all limits. I know.
For sure.
But yeah, self-awareness, yeah, bias.
Well, self-awareness, that's something that it's kind of like you're never going to be fully self-aware. So that's
Yes.
the other point. It's like
Okay.
it's not a set destination where you're here and, well,
I've done the work.
I am
self-aware.
fully self-aware, right? That doesn't happen. So it's like a continuous journey.
Yeah.
That can feel scary and overwhelming, but
For
to
sure.
me, I think it's kind of exciting because there's always something to learn. But I'm a nerd, so.
Yes, Jamie, you're a nerd.
Giant nerd.
Opening up our eyes. Jamie and I are just two friends chatting on the couch, but if you want some personal and professional advice, go to theamaryllisproject.com.